The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, echoing quiet that settles in after a door slams, and you realize you're truly alone. That was the sound that greeted me. The night my husband called me useless and told me to leave. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just picked up my coat, grabbed my keys, and walked out into the cold, clutching the only thing I had left, a battered envelope, with my father's handwriting on the front. I'd always thought the worst day of my life would be the day my father died. But grief is a strange thing. It doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in slow and sharp, in the moments you least expect. When you reach for the phone to call him, when you see his favorite mug in the cupboard, when you realize the world keeps spinning even though yours has stopped. My father had been gone for 3 months, and in that time, my marriage had unraveled thread by thread until all that was left was resentment and silence. The will was read on a rainy Tuesday. My sister Claire arrived in a tailored suit, her hair perfectly styled, her smile tight and expectant. She'd always been the golden child, the one who made straight A's, who married a surgeon, who lived in a penthouse with a view of the city. I was the afterthought, the one who stayed close to home, who worked odd jobs, who never quite fit the mold my parents had hoped for. When the lawyer handed out the inheritance, Claire got the luxury apartments downtown, 3 gleaming towers, fully rented, worth millions. I got the old motel on the edge of town, the one with the flickering neon sign and the peeling paint, the one everyone said should have been bulldozed years ago. Claire didn't even try to hide her smirk. "Well, at least you'll have somewhere to stay," she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. My husband, Mark, was furious. He'd spent weeks talking about what we'd do with the money. Vacations, renovations, maybe even a new car. When he realized all I'd inherited was a dying motel, his disappointment turned to contempt. That night at dinner, he didn't bother lowering his voice. "You're useless," he spat, pushing his plate away. "You can't even get an inheritance right." I waited for him to apologize, to take it back, but he just stood up and left the room. I sat there staring at the cold food, feeling smaller than I ever had before. When he came back, he tossed my coat at me and pointed to the door. "Go sleep in your motel," he said. "See how far that gets you." So I did. The drive to the motel felt like a journey back in time. Every streetlight cast long shadows across the dashboard, and the radio played static between stations. I pulled into the gravel lot, the tires crunching beneath me, and stared at the building. The sign still read Sunset Inn, though half the letters were burned out. The office windows were dark, and the parking lot was empty except for a single rusted pickup truck. I unlocked the office door with the key from my father's envelope. The air inside was thick with dust and the faint scent of old coffee. I flicked on the light, and the room glowed a sickly yellow. The desk was covered in papers, ledgers, receipts, a faded photograph of my father standing in front of the motel, smiling like he owned the world. I wandered through the lobby, running my fingers along the worn counter, the cracked vinyl chairs, the faded wallpaper. Every inch of the place felt haunted by memories I didn't have. I wondered what my father had seen in this place, why he'd held on to it when he could have sold it years ago. I found a room at the end of the hall with a door that stuck in the frame. Inside, the bed was made, the sheets stiff and cold. I sat on the edge, listening to the hum of the old refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, the distant sound of traffic on the highway. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's face, heard his voice, felt the sting of his words. At some point, exhaustion won. I drifted off, wrapped in my coat, the motel blanket pulled up to my chin. I dreamed of my father, his laugh, his stories, the way he used to ruffle my hair and call me his wild card. I woke up shivering, the room colder than before, the window rattling in the wind. That's when I heard it, a faint sound like footsteps in the hallway. I sat up, heart pounding, listening. The motel was supposed to be empty. I crept to the door and pressed my ear against it. Silence. Then, another sound, a soft thud like something falling. I grabbed the flashlight from the office and stepped into the hallway. The carpet was threadbare, the walls lined with faded photographs of sunsets and smiling guests from decades past. I followed the sound to the end of the hall, where a door stood slightly ajar. I pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. The room was dark, but I could make out the shape of a suitcase on the bed. Half open, clothes spilling out. On the nightstand, a stack of letters tied with a red ribbon. I picked one up, my hands trembling. The envelope was addressed to me in my father's handwriting. I froze, the flashlight beam trembling across the page. My father had left me more than a motel. He'd left me a secret. My breath caught as I stared at the envelope. My name written in the looping, careful script I'd known since childhood. For a moment, I just stood there, the cold seeping through my socks, the silence pressing in. I slid my finger under the flap and unfolded the letter inside. The paper soft and worn at the edges. If you're reading this, it means you're finally here, the letter began. I hope you came alone. There are things I never told you, things I couldn't trust anyone else with. This motel is more than it seems. I know it looks like a burden, but it's a key. You'll understand soon. I read the words twice, then a third time, searching for meaning. My father had always been a man of few words, but when he spoke, he meant every syllable. I looked around the room, suddenly aware of how little I knew about this place. The peeling wallpaper, the old suitcase, the stack of letters. What was I supposed to find here? I sat on the edge of the bed and untied the ribbon around the letters. Each envelope was addressed to me, dated months, even years apart. The first was from the year I graduated high school. The next from the week I got married. The third from the day my mother died. Each one was a snapshot of a moment I'd lived, but never realized my father had marked in his own way. I opened the oldest letter. Inside, my father wrote about the day he bought the motel. He'd been younger than I was now, full of hope and fear, convinced he could build something lasting. He wrote about the guests who'd come and gone, the families who'd stayed for a night or a month, the secrets the walls had kept. He wrote about me, how he'd always seen something in me that others missed, how he hoped I'd find my own way, even if it wasn't the path everyone expected. I wiped my eyes, surprised by the tears. I'd spent so long feeling like a disappointment, like I'd failed to live up to the O'Connor name. But here, in these letters, my father saw me. He understood me in a way no one else ever had. I opened the next letter, the one from the week I got married. My father's words were careful, almost hesitant. I hope Mark treats you well, he wrote. But if he doesn't, remember you always have a place here. This motel is yours, no matter what anyone else says. I let out a shaky laugh. My father had known even then that Mark wasn't the man he pretended to be. He'd seen through the charm, the promises, the easy smiles. He'd left me a way out, a place to land when everything else fell apart. I opened the last letter, the one from the day my mother died. My father's grief bled through every line. I don't know how to do this without her, he wrote. But I know you're stronger than you think. If you ever feel lost, come here. There's something I want you to find. I looked around the room, searching for a clue. The suitcase on the bed was old, the leather cracked and faded. I unzipped it, half expecting to find nothing but dust. Instead, I found a small wooden box locked with a brass key. I turned it over in my hands, searching for a way in. I remembered the envelope from my father's will, the one I'd brought with me. I dug it out of my coat pocket and shook it gently. A small key fell into my palm, cool and heavy. I fitted into the lock and turned. Inside the box was a stack of cash, neatly bundled, and a deed to the motel, signed over to me, free and clear. There was also a photograph, yellowed with age, of my father standing in front of the motel with a man I didn't recognize. On the back, my father had written, "Trust him if you need help." I stared at the photo, my mind racing. Who was this man? Why had my father trusted him? I slipped the photo into my pocket and closed the box, my heart pounding. I spent the rest of the night exploring the motel, searching for more clues. In the office, I found ledgers dating back decades, each one meticulously kept. My father had written notes in the margins, reminders, warnings, bits of advice. In the maintenance closet, I found a toolbox with a false bottom. Inside was a folder labeled "For Emma," my name again in my father's hand. The folder contained documents, bank statements, business licenses, a list of contacts. My father had been preparing for this moment for years, quietly building a safety net I never knew existed. He'd left me everything I needed to start over. As dawn crept through the windows, I sat in the lobby, surrounded by the pieces of my father's life. I felt a strange mix of grief and gratitude, loss and hope. For the first time since he died, I didn't feel alone. My phone buzzed. It was Mark. I stared at the screen, his name flashing, and felt nothing but exhaustion. I let it ring. A few minutes later, a car pulled into the lot. I watched from the window as a man stepped out, older, with a kind face and a limp. He looked just like the man in the photograph. He knocked on the office door and I opened it, clutching the photo in my hand. "You must be Emma," he said, his voice gentle. "Your father told me you'd come." I nodded, too stunned to speak. He smiled, a little sadly. "He was a good man. He wanted you to know you're not alone." I invited him in, and we sat together in the lobby as the sun rose, painting the motel in gold. He told me stories about my father, how they'd built the business together, how my father had helped people when no one else would, how he'd always believed in second chances. As I listened, I realized my father hadn't left me a burden. He'd left me a legacy. The sun was fully up now, casting long beams through the dusty lobby windows, making the old linoleum glow. I sat across from the man my father had trusted, the photograph between us on the coffee table. He introduced himself as Walter, and as he spoke, I realized how much of my father's life I'd never known. Walter told me about the early days, when the motel was new and full of hope, when my father would fix leaky faucets for free and let families stay an extra night if they needed it. He told me about the kindnesses my father had done quietly, the debts he'd forgiven, the way he'd always believed that everyone deserved a place to rest. I listened, feeling the weight of my father's choices settle on my shoulders, not as a burden, but as a strange, unexpected gift. Walter reached into his coat and handed me a small notebook. "Your dad wanted you to have this," he said. He wrote in it every day. Thoughts, ideas, sometimes just a list of things he was grateful for. He said it helped him remember what mattered. I opened the notebook, flipping through pages filled with my father's handwriting. Some entries were simple. Fixed room 7's heater. Emma called today. Claire sent a postcard, while others were more reflective. Emma is stronger than she knows. I hope she finds her way here when she's ready. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them away, not wanting to miss a word. Walter stood to leave, but paused at the door. "If you ever need anything, you call me. Your father was my friend. That makes you family." I nodded, clutching the notebook to my chest, and watched as he drove away, his old truck rumbling down the empty road. I wandered the motel grounds, seeing everything with new eyes. The peeling paint, the cracked sign, the empty rooms, they weren't just signs of neglect. They were a canvas waiting for someone to care again. I thought about my sister, Claire, in her luxury apartments, surrounded by glass and steel, and wondered if she'd ever know what it felt like to inherit something real, something built on love and trust. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Mark. "Come home. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, remembering the way he'd looked at me last night, the way he'd called me useless, the way he'd thrown me out without a second thought. I realized with a clarity that surprised me that I didn't want to go back. Not now, maybe not ever. Instead, I sent him a single reply. "I'm staying at the motel. Don't come." I spent the day cleaning, opening windows, letting fresh air chase away the ghosts. I found old guest books filled with messages, thank yous, stories, even a few drawings from children who'd stayed there years ago. I scrubbed the lobby floor, polished the front desk, and made a pot of coffee just the way my father used to. As I worked, I felt something inside me shift. I wasn't just surviving, I was starting over. That night, as the sky turned purple and the neon sign flickered to life, I sat on the front steps and watched the cars pass by on the highway. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. I thought about everything I'd lost, my marriage, my old life, the future I'd imagined, and realized that maybe, just maybe, I'd gained something better. I opened my father's notebook to a page near the end. In his careful script, he'd written, "Sometimes the best things in life come disguised as second chances. Don't be afraid to start again." I smiled, feeling his presence beside me, steady and sure. I looked around at the motel, my motel, and saw not a burden, but a beginning. And as the night settled in, I knew I wasn't useless. I was exactly where I was meant to be.